Hey guys, TrainerDC here, coming at you with another video. In a recent video on the channel, we went over the original starters and legendary designs for Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. I'll leave a card above to that video if you don't know what I'm talking about. But in the leak that revealed those designs, we also had a plethora of cross-gen evolutions and pre-evolutions that were scrapped during development. And I wanted to take a look at those Pokemon today in this video, so without further ado, let's get into this. The first Pokemon for today that was going to get a pre-evolution in Diamond and Pearl was Lapras. Lapras to me always felt like a Pokemon that deserved something. I always felt like Lapras needed a pre-evolution. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to see the full design because we can only see the bottom half of the body, and then on the bottom image, we can only see part of the side of it in the top half. It looks like these are two different versions of the same Pokemon, as the second image looks like it has spikes on its back as well as the things on its mouth, and the first image we can't really see what the head looks like, but it looks to be a more flat back of the body of the Pokemon. Overall, I do think this is something that probably should have been included in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, or just a Pokemon game in general, because Lapras to me always growing up felt like a Pokemon that needed a pre-evolution, and it's interesting to see that in Diamond and Pearl it was going to get a pre-evolution. A Pokemon on the other hand that was going to get an evolution in Diamond and Pearl was Delibird here. Delibird's always been a weird Pokemon to me because it's kind of just a forgettable mon, if I'm being honest. Like, I know it's the Santa mon, I know people love it, but it's kind of useless competitively speaking. So giving this Pokemon an evolution would have been really interesting to see what they would have done with it and would it have been competitively viable here. Design wise, you can see that it becomes more Santa-like. Its beard growing out and its hair growing out that you can't even see its eyes. It gets a Santa hat and it still has its Santa suit, and the bag becomes bigger and bigger. So I'm very curious what this Pokemon would have been able to do competitively speaking. I'm assuming it would have been a bulky defensive type Pokemon, but it's interesting to see that Delibird of all Pokemon was in line to get an evolution in the original Diamond and Pearl. Another Pokemon from Generation 2 that was going to get a pre-evolution this time is Stantler. Stantler here doesn't have a design attached to it, just this screenshot of some text saying they were working on a design. It's interesting that Stantler was in line to get something though, because obviously we know in Generation 8 Stantler eventually got an evolution in Word Year, but in Generation 4 it was in line to get a pre-evolution, which I really don't think it needs. I feel like Stantler, if anything, needed an evolution, not a pre-evolution, so maybe it's for the best that this Pokemon got cut. On the other hand, a Pokemon that I'm really upset with being cut is this evolution for Swellow here. Swellow always felt odd to me in Gen 3, that it had only a two-stage line from Taillow to Swellow and that's it. I always felt like Swellow needed a little something, and apparently Game Freak did as well, because in Generation 4 they were working on this design here. Unfortunately, we can't see the full picture as the bottom half of it is cut off, but I think we get a pretty good idea at what this would have looked like based on the design that we can see of it. And overall, I like this thing a lot. It looks really cool to me, and I'm very curious what the typing of this Pokemon would have been. Swellow and Taillow are normal flying types, but this Pokemon, I wonder if it would have gained the electric typing, given that there is a lot of yellow on its body now, or maybe it would have stayed normal flying, I don't know, but electric flying would have been really cool. And yeah, this is one that I'm really upset that got cut. It looks so cool to me. Swellow was always one of my favorite Pokemon growing up, and I think this would have enhanced the line a lot. Maybe we'll see something like this in the future in like a regional Swellow. I could see this coming in Winds and Waves, honestly, a different version of Swellow, because we've seen Taillow in Winds and Waves, but we've yet to see a Swellow, so maybe they revisit this topic and introduce a similar looking design in Pokemon Winds and Waves or a future Pokemon game. Next up, we have what is considered quote unquote a possible Mawile relative. I'm gonna be honest here, I don't really see how this is a Mawile pre-evolution or evolution or whatever this was meant to be. It doesn't really look anything like Mawile to me, and I'm not really seeing the resemblance here. To me, this just looks like a different Pokemon, but according to Lutu, according to the people who compiled this leak, apparently this was supposed to be a Mawile related Pokemon, which I don't really see that personally. They're saying this could have been a gender variant for Mawile, but again, I'm not really seeing it. Next up, we have what looks to be a baby Plusle and Minun here, which is so confusing to me because obviously Plusle and Minun are the Pikachu clones for Generation 3, being Ruby and Sapphire, and these Pokemon that were going to be introduced in Generation 4 are strikingly similar to them, but also don't really have anything to do with them at the same time. And what I mean by this is, yes, they do look like Plusle and Minun, yes, they do look like baby versions of those Mons, but one of them is a pink heart on its tail and one of them has a red circle on its tail. They have nothing to do with plus or minus, so I'm curious if these would have been brand new Pokemon in and of themselves, but obviously they do have a striking resemblance to Plusle and Minun, so I'm very curious what these would have been. I don't think they would have been pre-evolutions, but clearly there is some relation to Plusle and Minun here, so that's a little bit odd to me to be seeing. Next up, we have an evolution which, to me, oh man, this would have been so cool. It is a Kecleon evolution, and as you can see here, unfortunately, we only have the back of this Pokemon, but from the back of it, it looks like it would have been a menacing mon, and I really like the direction of its design. Of course, we don't know what the front of it looks like, so it's hard to fully articulate that and talk about the mon, but it's interesting to see that Kecleon was a Pokemon that was in line to get an evolution in Diamond and Pearl, because we know from Winds and Waves' leaks that apparently Kecleon is going to get a weather form with the new gimmick, which really felt like it came out of left field to me that Kecleon of all Pokemon is getting something. But apparently this isn't the first time that Kecleon was in line for something, some sort of revisit, because they were going to do it originally in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl Generation 4. And to be honest with you, I kind of wish that they did, because this version of Kecleon, this evolution, looks really, really cool. Next up, we have what looks to be a pre-evolution of Stunky here. It looks to be a baby Stunky, so presumably Stunky's line was originally going to be a 3-stage line, and this baby Pokemon was going to be the first evolution of Stunky, or the first stage, I should say. And yeah, I don't really think Stunky and Skuntank needed to have a pre-evolution, so I think that being a 2-stage line and canceling this mon was probably the right way to go, because it seems really unnecessary to me, if I'm being honest here. Lastly, we have an honorable mention here that actually isn't from this leak, but is from the Terra League, so shout out to Pokeos for putting this one out there on their site. But Vulpix was supposed to get a baby pre-evolution in Diamond and Pearl, as you can see on screen. It's shown alongside Mime Jr. and Munchlax, so this design presumably got farther along into development, since these are close to being the final versions of Mime Jr. and Munchlax. Presumably this Vulpix evolution, or rather Vulpix pre-evolution, got farther along in development, and I actually think while a Vulpix pre-evolution seems quite unnecessary, I really do like this design a lot here, and I wouldn't have minded seeing it in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. I am curious why it was scrapped, because I feel like you introduce Munchlax, you introduce Mime Jr., you introduce Pokemon like Smoochum and Elekid in Generation 2. I don't really see why this baby version of Vulpix deserved to be cut, but nevertheless, it is a Pokemon that got cut during Diamond and Pearl's development, and to be honest, I would have liked to see this Pokemon actually make it into the final version of the game, because I think it looks really cool, and I think it would have been neat to see it starts out as a 3-tailed fox before eventually evolving into a 9-tailed fox. I think that would have been really cool to see. But yeah, that's it for the cross-gen pre-evolutions and evolutions that were scrapped from Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. It's interesting to see which Pokemon were in line for a evolution or pre-evolution. Like Delibird just feels like it came out of left field alongside Kecleon, but then Pokemon like Lapras feel like they desperately needed to get something, but I'm curious to see why these ended up getting scratched, because all we really know is that they were planned for the game, as they were a part of a sizzle reel. They weren't really talked about all that much. Anyways, let me know down in the comment section below what you guys think about all of this. Do you guys wish any of these Pokemon made it into the final version of the game? Do you agree with me that the Swellow evolution and Lapras pre-evolution should have made it into the final version of the game? Or maybe you're happy they didn't. Maybe you wanted to see something else happen with some other Pokemon. Maybe you wanted to see this Kecleon evolution make it in there, or heck, maybe even the Delibird evolution. Let me know down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to see more content like this from Trainer DC. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.